Hey, I'm Michael Trenz. Entrepreneur in Action is where we dive into the lives of entrepreneurs who master the four F's: finance, fitness, family, and fun. Our mission: help you thrive in business and life. Today's guest is Adam Fraser, former CTO of Ziverge, who's building business in blockchain, cybersecurity, and finance. I think you're going to love it. Welcome to Entrepreneur in Action. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, welcome. So, Adam Fraser, you're previously at Ziverge. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Cyberge, but
Ziverge? Yeah,
when you make words, you can't complain about how people pronounce them.
that's true. And then so now you're doing your own thing. Why don't you tell us about what you're doing now and how you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say right now I'm maybe at the beginning of the latest leg of my entrepreneur journey. But right now I've gotten into the blockchain space. So I'm doing blockchain development and security research in particular. So there's a lot of money in these decentralized finance applications, and decentralized finance is amazing, blockchain is amazing, but it means that code is kind of law to a certain extent. And so if you have a bug in that code, a lot of money can get stolen there. And so that also creates a lot of opportunities for people to help review this code and make sure that it's safe and that it doesn't have vulnerabilities in it, and figure out ways to make that code safer in the future. So I've been doing some of that, and I've also got a couple of other ideas I'm working on in that space probably.
Oh, nice. So,
Yeah.
okay, so I've actually heard about these things happening from other friends I've talked to who've worked on projects. I think it was he was working with a project that was headed up by a baseball player, and they created this NFT series. And when they sent the payment to themselves, like they collected all the money from people who bought the NFTs, and then they sent it to themselves, and it was like tens of millions of dollars, and that transaction failed, and that money is now lost forever. Like
Yeah, so I will say, even when I'm doing things myself, if I'm sending a large amount to a wallet for the first time, I'll send like a cent there first to make sure it went through before I send the rest of it. So yeah, I mean that is kind of a microcosm of kind of I guess the benefits and the risks of there's not like an organization, JP Morgan Chase, that you're kind of trusting with your money, which in a way is good. Someone can't just take it that way, but it also means that it's just kind of you. And if you kind of do something wrong, it's not like we can send a wire to the wrong person. You just call up JP Morgan to be like, oh, can you like pull that back? It's like, no, doesn't work that way.
Absolutely. So how are you finding these opportunities? So you're in business for yourself at this point, am I right?
Yeah, it's just me. Exactly.
So how do you find opportunities in this space, right? So I know I've heard of things like bug bounty programs where various companies know that there might be some sort of vulnerability in their code, and so they offer like a public bounty. Like it could be anywhere from tens of thousands up to like larger numbers, I assume. How are you finding the opportunities that you're taking action on?
Yeah, so right now a lot of what I'm doing is things like that. So I think that the space is really good. Of companies obviously recognize that there is this risk. So I think a lot of good companies in the space will have their own bug bounty programs, and then there's also several platforms that will basically have competitions that they'll sponsor with companies. So they'll say like, hey, we're working with XYZ company over the next month. Here's their code. Here's how much money is available, and kind of anyone can get involved there. So it's good in a way, in that it's very kind of open and meritocratic. And eventually, I want to transition from that to doing more things on a consulting basis and kind of build those relationships. But it's a really good way as you kind of get into the space to develop that.
Yeah. And so how do you demonstrate when you find a vulnerability, right? So I've
Yeah,
heard of, this is a fresh topic for us, right? We've
yeah,
never
yeah,
talked
yeah.
about this before. So the questions I want to ask are questions that would maybe be questions that a lot of people might want to know. So like, how would you demonstrate that this is a significant vulnerability? So if like one thing I have seen is that some people who are doing, hopefully white hat, a version of what you're doing, right? They'll actually make the transaction happen, and then they'll reverse it, and then they'll go to the company maybe and say, hey, look, this was a vulnerability. I took $100 million and I gave it back. So now do I get the code fee? Like, I don't know. How does that work? How does that work into the situation that you're describing?
Yeah, so you try to avoid doing that wherever possible. So generally, one of the good things about these blockchains is they're deterministic. So you put the same inputs in, you get the same outputs out. And so what you can generally do is you'll do something called like a proof of code, where you'll say essentially, well, I took all your code, I deployed it on this like test network. I gave your protocol $100 million. I gave myself $1 million. I did all this stuff. And at the end, your protocol, you lost $40 million or whatever. And in that way, it's both very objective, hopefully, but also you're not actually taking anyone's money when you're doing that proof of code. So I think that's kind of the best case scenario. I think sometimes there you get into like a little bit of subjectivity where maybe, you say, well, it's a vulnerability, but someone else says, well, you did this thing that couldn't really happen or whatever. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully it's very objective. But I think really you want to stay away from the kind of thing that you raised. Some companies do have like safe harbor policies where they'll say if you kind of actually hack us for some minimal amount, that's okay. But you can get into real trouble doing that. So like there's actually a company called Certic in the blockchain space that kind of got themselves into a lot of trouble. They basically identified a vulnerability with Kraken, which is one of the big crypto exchanges. But they initially kind of proved it the way you suggested, where they like took $4 and fine, right? $4 proves the vulnerability is not going to like make anyone rich. They then took some more money, and they then basically went to them and said like, well, we'll refund it after you pay us the bounty for finding the bug. And at that point, you're basically stealing and extorting money, and they kind of got drugged out of the industry pretty quickly. But I think you really want to stay as far away from that as you possibly can.
That makes a lot of sense, right? so they, when you, if you do the hack as you described, right, and they actually take an amount of money that's meaningful, more than $4, let's say, then and then you say, I'll give it back only if you pay me that. Now you've entered into an illegal territory and you've committed a crime. So
100%. Yeah.
Much safer, as you described, to deploy it on some sort of test network. Is there like a recognized test network, or is that something you set up yourself? How does the test network work?
So there are a couple of existing test networks. It depends on exactly what blockchain you're on. But typically the large ones will have some test networks, but also you can create your own, essentially like private fork of a blockchain that it's not actual money for anyone else, but you're kind of starting with a certain state and you're playing it forward from there, and you're showing the impact that these transactions would have. So there are a couple of ways to do it, but not using real money.
Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad you're staying on the safe side of this. And it's definitely white hat. And it's all on the up and up, and for the betterment of the community, right? Because finding these bugs means that it's not going to be found by somebody who will exploit it in the future.
Yeah, because I think there are all these longer term benefits of this technology, but you can look at prior years and it's a non-trivial amount of total money that gets hacked every year. And if that kind of keeps up, right? I mean, you don't want to like invest in bank where you're saying, well, every year you're going to lose 1% of your money on average to just like it being hacked. Like that doesn't work. So we as an industry have to address that.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's really nice. That's like a virtuous cycle, because when somebody finds one and then somebody finds another and then you're getting paid for it. So like, how do you make sure you do get paid for it? You submit the proof of work. Have you gotten paid for one of these bounties yet, or how?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I definitely I'm not getting rich on these bounties right now, but I have, and generally it works pretty well. Especially like I think if you go through some of those audit platforms where there's kind of a sponsored competition, that audit platform itself is kind of a startup, and part of their brand is that like if you find something they pay you, right? Because otherwise they're not going to have people kind of come to their next competition. So it's a pretty, I'd say, virtuous cycle, as you said. I think a lot of those platforms are actually started by people who were doing this kind of security research themselves. So there's a real alignment of incentives there.
Then tell me about the future of this for you. Is your goal, like you're doing it now as a solopreneur, do you want to build a bigger team and create a company around this? Would you ideally like to be hired at a company to work for them full time to do this? Like what is your next level goal?
Yeah, so I think I'm really excited about the space, and I'm kind of trying to figure out the best way I can add value and build something here. And so I think this is a really good starting point, both to start to generate value for myself as well as the people I'm working with, and to just get relationships with some of these other applications and companies. Because one of the really neat things about it is when you're doing one of these, you're not just kind of looking, well, here's this line of code, here's this line of code, but you're saying, what's this application trying to do, and how could someone take advantage of what they're trying to do? And so you're also learning about a lot of different companies and business models in the space. So So, I mean, definitely continue to do that is one option. But one of the other things I've been really excited about is, maybe we'll get to it, but some of my background before was in finance. And there's obviously kind of a big connection between blockchain and finance. And I think there are some interesting opportunities there. And I think particularly one of the things I see is there are a lot of very attractive, I think, investment opportunities in the blockchain space for anyone, right? If you just say, like, I have whatever $1,000, I'd like to essentially earn some interest on it. There are probably ways you can do it in this ecosystem that are going to give you, I would say, a higher return, and at least a different risk reward return than you would if you went with a bank or what have you. But I think for a lot of people, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but I think a lot of people I know, they kind of wouldn't know where to start there. And they'd kind of be justifiably hesitant to do something there because the reality is there are some things you can do that are sensible investments, I'll call it. And there are some things you can do that either you're just going to get scammed or are just crazy and you're essentially just rolling the dice of, you're going to make 10 times the money or you're going to lose everything. So I think there's potentially a role for something that we'll say about like an investment advisor that like focuses on this space that brings you a little bit of what you maybe are used to of you imagine you go to your financial advisor at Wells Fargo or whatever, and you don't know the details of every stock or every different investment thing, but they kind of say, well, here's what we think makes sense. And you kind of know based on that brand and based on the fiduciary obligation they have that they're not just kind of going to steal your money. So I think something like that that's kind of a bridge from call it traditional investors to some of these opportunities is something that I'm exploring.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background in finance. Would that be with Ziverge or before that, or how
before that actually? So yeah. I've had a little bit of a winding journey, as maybe a lot of us have. But yeah. I started my career in management consulting, and then I did private equity, and then I worked at a company called Wellington Management, which I joke is the largest asset manager you've never heard of. But they actually manage a lot of money for Vanguard. So big investment firm, and managed a portfolio for them, investing in stocks and bonds and stuff like that. Yeah, I think in a way I've got that technology background of being at Ziverge and I was a CTO there, as well as some of that traditional finance background. So it's a little bit of an interesting opportunity to combine those two. I think it's one of those things you don't think about as you're doing each of those things, but when you get something, you're like, oh, this actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Those are fascinating worlds, right?
Yeah.
You could just go down one rabbit hole of finance, and that could be your whole career, or you could go down the tech world, and that could be your whole career. But once you realize you have expertise in both, now you have like a certain type of specialty, which is more unique, and then can put you in more demand in terms of having various roles. I guess that is one of the questions I have. Like, do you feel like you want to commit yourself to like being at a certain type of company, or do you want to like make your own company? Do you want to be at a startup? What do you see for yourself in the future, or are you open? Like, where are you at with
I mean, I think it's always good to be somewhat open, but I also kind of have a vision of where you want to go. And I think right now I'm pretty happy either doing my own thing, or I'm thinking maybe bringing in like one other person to do like more of the kind of finance thing. But I think part of what I'm valuing right now is having a little bit more flexibility to either put my foot on the gas or take my foot off the gas. And some of the previous company I was at, we probably had about 35 employees, say. We were kind of raising money from outside investors, and that's all fantastic. But then there's a different like level of expectation versus right now. I think one of the things, at least right now, I'm enjoying is I can kind of do a little more or a little less, and it's just me. I'm not letting anyone else down if I'm prioritizing other aspects of my life to some extent.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing from you is that like when you feel that outside investor pressure, that for you feels like pressure, right? I think that's a value that some people have. So I have that value as well, right? If somebody was paying me money to do something, I'd be like, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing that thing that you're paying me to do. Absolutely. But I think some people like don't have that in their DNA, and they're just like, you gave me money. Cool.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. I mean, I guess there's another like intellectually way you can look at it. I mean, depending on the person that it is, it could be some venture capitalist like you gave me money, you gave 100 other people money. Your business model is one of these people are going to do something for you, and that's going to be my attitude. But yeah, I agree. I think there's at least I have a real sense of responsibility there.
Yeah. So it is nice, as you said, right, to have this place where you can be a little more free with yourself. You feel a little less stress in your daily life in terms of you're not beholden to some other person's interests. how do you like then give yourself like how do you motivate yourself to work for yourself?
I guess one of the things I really try to do is like find things that I'm just naturally excited about doing. And kind of an idea of like follow your energy of what I think when I'm doing something, part of what kind of gets me to say this is something I should do at all is that energy comes very naturally. Like when I was starting Ziverge, I remember I kind of had like a brother at the time, and funny thing, she was sometimes like, Adam, I want to go out on Saturday night or whatever, and I'm like, oh, like I'm gotta figure out this problem. I want to like build this thing. And that's definitely going to ebb and flow sometimes, but I think that's an important thing to listen to. And I think actually one of the reasons I decided it was kind of time for my next adventure was I was feeling down a little bit less, I would say, at the beginning of this year, and I was like, okay, I gotta listen to this a little bit.
So how does it come to you? Like how do you, like you said, you feel the energy, right? You're listening to it. How does it come to you? Do you hear a voice? Do you feel like a boost inside you somewhere? Like where is that? Where is that
It's
energy?
I think for me, it's kind of like a question that like has to be answered. And you know, you have different things that you frame as a question, but you know, it's almost like if you're, I don't know, reading a mystery novel and you want to know who did it, or you're, you're watching Game of Thrones and you're like, hey, I want to see the last episode. I want to know what happens with Jon Snow or whatever. I think it's a similar thing of like, okay, I want to see like how do we, how can we build this, or are there going to be issues we run into, or I think this works. Does this really work?
So that question mark,
Yeah,
there's a how can we?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. As opposed to, what sometimes we might tell ourselves a lot, which is like, this is how it won't work, right? Which is very like draining, right? Not energy creating place question to ask, but how can we is a great question. And then, okay, so just dig into this a little more. Bear with me
yeah,
if you
yeah,
don't mind.
yeah.
So if you're asking how can we, what happens when you solve that question? That how can we, right? What if the question, what does the question have to be so that it can keep being a question?
Well, I think hopefully the question leads to other questions that you're kind of building on top of that thing of like when I was doing the stuff with Cybersecurity, basically we were writing the software that was like kind of open source library that helped people build cloud applications. And so there's like a whole stack of things that people want to do of like, okay, well, initially you just want to like be able to describe these concurrent or parallel processes and have them all work together nicely. But then on top of that, maybe you want database access, you want HTML, you want all these other things. And so I think it's kind of finding the next question there of it kind of leads you down the line.
So it has to be when the answer gets you to the next question. That's what I'm hearing, right? The
Yeah,
answer gets you to the next question, and then you still have to be interested in that next question. And it's, yeah,
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that can sometimes be a challenge, and I mean, probably is a natural thing that people have sometimes. I mean, maybe they wouldn't frame it in the question way, but doing a company between 1 and 10 million is different than doing a company between 10 and 100 million. And sometimes you're interested in one and not interested in the other. And I think that can be a difficult thing to realize, but that's a totally legitimate way to feel.
yeah, yeah. Some people really gravitate towards like those certain uh, phases of a business,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, they want to do the 1 to 10 million, and maybe they don't want to do the 10 to 100 million. They want to go back to it. They want to move on to a different thing. So is that how? Yeah. So my next question for you is like, how do you know when you're done with a project and you're like, okay, I think I've said and had the conversations here, and I've learned what I want to learn, and now I'm ready to move on. How does that show up for you? How do you know, like, okay, I'm ready?
Yeah. So I think it's maybe not a immediate answer, but I think one of the things I try to do is I try to follow that energy. So, uh, you can think of like that, like 100% is like, hey, like I'm almost holding myself back. So I'm not a pain to the rest of the people in my life that like, yes, I will do other things. I'm not just going to do this thing. Right. And if that's where you are, then, call that like the gas tank's 100% full, 100%, whatever you want to call it. I think sometimes you might, at least I find I might notice sometimes that I'm more like, oh, I guess I got to do this thing. Let me go and get myself, I'll go Starbucks first. Let me get myself a cup of coffee and get like energized, and then I'll do this thing. And okay, that's like, there's not so much there. And you've got to have a balance with that because the reality is some days you're just not going to feel it as much. And even this overall thing could be great, but sometimes there's something you've got to do for it that is a pain and is not fun and not exciting, but just what you need to do. So you got to moderate it that way. But if I find myself kind of consistently feeling that I'm like pushing myself to kind of rally that energy versus just that energy being there. And then I'm like, okay, I gotta reflect a little bit.
I think this is really fascinating because like, you know, to me, like what I'm hearing from you is like if you have to bump up your energy, then and if it's maybe if that's something that you're feeling a lot, then maybe you'll notice like, hey, uh maybe I'm not as interested. Maybe I need to find that question, right? Or if, like you said, you were prioritizing like going out versus, or spending time with your SO versus like doing the thing, and that if you're like super interested in the problem at that moment, right? And then you have to, flip and just go like, okay, wait, this other thing's also important too. So I think that's because this podcast is a lot about like how do you actually like balance these different areas of your life, right?
Yeah.
Finance, fitness, family, and fun. So let's go ahead and go with that, and
Yeah.
I'll ask you a little bit about how do you know like you want to, and is there like a transition, like if you're like in the zone, in the moment, working on a problem in something that's your entrepreneurship or your career, like a finance area, right? And then
Yeah.
a family area comes up, right? Where as I was like, let's go out on a date. How do you make that transition so that you can still, balance what you want to do and keep having fun, or keep energized? How do you do that, Adam?
Yeah. So I don't know if I've 100% figured that out. So I'll just share maybe whatever I feel like I have. But I think the first thing, most important thing is just like getting the right person to be that like SO or whatever life husband, whatever you want to call it. And I think a big part of that is like really feeling like you're on the same team there, where your starting point is not like, well, you're doing this like stupid business thing and like you need to like minimize your time on it so you can spend time on me, but more like, hey, we are collectively like trying to achieve our like couple's goals as a team, right? And one of the goals maybe out of business, and one of the goals is her XYZ. And like we're collectively trying to maximize all those goals together versus like having different goals. And I think if you have someone who feels that way and you can feel that way and you can communicate with each other that way, then that like creates a much, I think, better non-adversarial way that you can like think about those things of like, I think sometimes like that. So when things have been going well, has been able to really be kind of a good person to me and be like, does it really matter if you do this thing tonight or tomorrow? Maybe are you sure you're like the most energized and productive now versus tomorrow? Because like definitely when I've been doing software stuff, I've had times when like I stay up super late and doing all this stuff and like I don't figure it out yet. And then like the next morning, I'll like just immediately like, oh yeah, it's this thing. And the reality probably part of that is because I was like working through it the previous night, but part of it is also you came back to it with a fresh headspace and a good night of sleep. And so I think questions like that you kind of have together is a good way to like start to work through that stuff.
Yeah, I really think that you mentioned like some of the really key points that I've found seem to work for me in like, most importantly, like significant other relationship as well, like the communication, right? Like when you let each other know, like this is something that is important to me, right? But also communication around, but as my SO, this relationship is also very important to me. And, we have to be able to communicate around this. I know that I've struggled in the past, having the exact communication you described, right? Like I'm hot on this problem right now, and I'm trying to solve in some area of life that's not with ESO, and I'm feeling it in the moment, but or it could be, that my SO is hot on something and they're feeling it in the moment, and I might be the one saying like, hey, let's have some us time, let's have some family time now. And this communication, I think, is super important. This exact conversation is super important to how it's handled, because there's a lot of emotion in that moment when somebody's really trying to work on something, and when the other and there's also emotion when the other person's like, hey, what about doing something together? So figuring out this conversation, I think, is actually super valuable for me. And you brought it up, so I imagine it's valuable for you. It's probably valuable for people watching. So like how how do we how would be a good way, do you think, right? If you were like giving yourself advice, right? Like how would you describe like a good way to have this conversation?
Well, I think one thing that can help a lot is maybe in advance of like needing to have that conversation, like having a different conversation to kind of set those goals together. Because I think if you've both like set those goals and kind of discuss those goals, that gives you something to come back to. And I think some of those goals should be like separate goals, right? Of like you want to grow your business, or your significant other, they want to grow their business or help their career. But I think also really important to like have goals that are like actually about like the two of you or about your family. I remember I was really struck, especially I think when I was younger, like I was more into like goal setting, right? And I had these different things of like, this year I want to run a marathon, this year I want to get this position or grow the business to this. And I remember I listened to this interview with, I think a VC, and he was talking about like some of the kind of goal setting he did. And he was saying one of his goals basically like, I want to have an amazing marriage with my wife this year. And like, I think he had some specific things there of like, let's do a trip together, let's do this. And that really struck me because I think it can be easy to kind of prioritize the things that are more measurable. And so, right, some of these things of the business thing can be more measurable, right? Of like, did we hit this revenue milestone? Did we like hit this goal? And some of the relationship things, at least if you don't really put work into it, can be less measurable. And I think then it becomes easy to kind of undervalue them. And it's kind of like, well, you take a little bit of a loan out of the bank until there's eventually no money there. And so I think having like that be a very explicit goal and kind of having talked about those things together then gives you like that common point of reference to come back to in those conversations.
Yeah. And I think what you brought up, like measuring, right? And how we're very used to measuring like revenue, right? It's a dollar amount. That's easy. Like I want to make this much money this year. Okay. Did I make it or not? Right. Or did I get this position offered to me that I wanted offered to me? Or did the business, increase the number of customers or whatever? Those things we measure a lot. But I think that it could be like, well, what do you think? I think that it could be easy to like measure some relationship stuff, which I heard you mention. Like, I'm just going to present it back to you as a question. Like, here's some easy ways you could measure relationship stuff, because you mentioned a couple of things just there, but I think some of those could be measurable.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there are probably some things of like, what are the goals you set together of like, we want to take a vacation together, or we want to do this many trips together, or we want to do a date night every 2 weeks. I think part of the challenge, honestly, is also overcoming your own fear of corniness. Because I think some of those things, like, they can feel a little artificial, right? If you're like, well, yeah, we have a goal and we do a date night every Friday, every 2 weeks. Like, I mean, it sounds like very unromantic in a way, right? Of like, is it supposed to be like just like spontaneous and all this magical stuff? But I think the reality is that like, as you get to know someone and as other things kind of come into your life and you get to be real like partners and just not the beginning of dating, like some of that stuff I think can be really valuable. And I think if you can get past the corniness, it can really help you out.
Yeah, I like that. So like, yeah, so I heard like some longer term things and then some like more regular, like vacations. Like if like we're going to take this many vacations together in a year, like we're going to have this many date nights, whether it's every other Friday or whatever the cadence is you decide. We're going to see each other or talk. What are we going to do on a daily basis? Right. Yeah. Are we going to be, for some couples, it might just be, just text me in the morning and say, how are you? Like that might be enough, for some couples, but some couples, they might want to like text, a couple times a day, and have like actual conversations on text. Maybe they want to pick up the phone and talk for half an hour, like whatever you guys decide as a couple. Right. So I'm hearing like 3 different things. Like there's like the daily, there's like the kind of within the month, whether that's, whatever, how often you're like meeting for like a date night, let's get dressed up, whatever you guys want to do, go to dinner or something. And then, like larger time frame, but still regular, like you're going to take a trip, whether it's this many months or a year or something. Those 3 different cadences, I think those could be really great to agree upon those things. And then the spontaneity, how could you measure this? Because I think it is important. How could you measure the spontaneity? Could you say like, I think we should do something spontaneous every other month at least, because I think it is. And even though but you can still measure it, like.
Yeah, I mean, you could say we're going to do I don't know, we're going to do a day activity every month, and one person's going to plan and surprise the other person, and pick whatever your thing is.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah.
I really like your kind of daily, monthly, kind of longer term framework. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I think so too. I was hearing it in what you were saying. I just put it into the daily monthly. But yeah, I think it's good too. I think we're coming up with some cool stuff here. So what do you have like in terms of like goals? Like what's your like What's your like? I asked you about your immediate like entrepreneurship goal. What's your like immediate like family goal? Like, what would you, from where you're at, what would you want? What do you want to
Yeah,
have?
I'm definitely I'd say farther behind on the family thing than some other people are. So I'm looking for the person, frankly. So I'm kind of out there. I'm doing that. So I mean my goals is kind of find someone who's an awesome partner, have some kids, do that whole thing. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So are you dating now? Are you on dating apps? Are you
I'm on the
looking?
market. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what are you finding is the biggest hurdle?
I mean, I think there's just a challenge of going from kind of the virtual to the uh, in person. I think the uh, dating apps can be challenging in a way of just like it's almost a paradox of choice. And I think there are a million people on there, and I think the reality is like probably a generation back, like you might, especially if you're like a small town or something, you might like go to your high school and there's someone who you think is pretty nice, and they're not like every possible thing you could come up with if you like made a checklist, but like they're a nice person, and really a lot of what you have becomes what you build together versus like did they initially check all these boxes. And I think sometimes with the online dating apps, you can kind of promote the opposite of like, well, if you don't check my 100 things, then let me just swipe on some more people and maybe there'll be someone who does. Versus like, hey, you're a good person. We treat each other well. Let's create something together here.
By the way, there's another checklist of 200 more things that I haven't even put in the checklist of 100 things. And
Yeah.
once I chop those out, you'll have to meet all those checks as well. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm hearing like the delta, the difference between like meeting them online and meeting them in person. Have you found a way to shortcut that and to bridge that gap by meeting people in person?
I haven't found like, I mean, I just try to get from the online to the in-person as quickly as I can. But I haven't found a great solution there. And maybe I've got to come up with some more creative, and this is a different version of marketing strategies, right? Um, but yeah, I feel like it can be challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a thing to be said for like having that context of this is a place where I think for from what I'm hearing and you, I'm guessing what I'm hearing. And then also I know from me when I was dating, like I know some people can feel comfortable enough just to talk to somebody in the grocery store. Like they could be at Trader Joe's, somebody's grabbing eggs, and you get eggs and go, "Oh, hey, watch out! That I saw that one has a broken egg," and then that can spark a conversation, and they can go from there. I found that to be not something that happened for me very often at all. I
Yeah.
was very not comfortable in that, although it might have been a great place to meet someone. It wasn't in my comfort zone because the context is a grocery store, and I didn't feel like comfortable to try something else besides buying groceries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
But yeah, so I'm just wondering if there's any places out there that are like have the context where there's meeting people, you know. I think that I think I think there are some places that could be identified. Um, might not be the grocery store, but I think there are some places. And like I one thing that I did that worked for me, I'll just put it out there
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
know,
yeah.
but I did social dancing,
Okay,
and that
nice. Yeah,
actually that that cuts out that bridges the gap, right?
right.
Because you are told to partner up, like
Yeah,
everybody's partnering up, and you have 4 minutes to talk to somebody.
yeah, that's a good idea.
They're probably there, you know, either to find an SO or to at least be open to conversation,
Yeah,
and
totally.
so that could be one.
Yeah.
I don't really know much about bars because I don't drink. I guess some people do that. I don't really understand that scene, but just, you know,
I'm with you.
like these are the things I could think of off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
Do you have any others that you could think of right now or just to help other people who might be in the
I,
same
I
boat?
mean, I think definitely like hobbies is one like good thing to think about. So like, I guess this is also getting a little bit into fitness, but like I like to run and bike. So like running groups or something like those could potentially be a good one. I always get like, I guess a little bit hesitant to your point about the grocery store that just like, yeah, I imagine there's maybe some woman there who just wants to run and doesn't want, some guy trying to hit on her. So I'm always maybe a little bit hesitant there, but I think the reality is I'm probably more hesitant in my head than I need to be.
I have heard that running groups, now that you mention it, I do remember hearing that running groups are a place where people connect in a romantic way.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's
Yeah.
another great example.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you like running, I mean, there you go. Okay, another one. And it doesn't have the same, with social dance, like there's a bit of a uphill battle for they call leads and follows. Like, so if you're a guy, it's a little bit of an uphill battle to get started,
Yeah.
because you have to learn some stuff.
Yeah.
But the cheat code for that is you get in a class, and then you're all in class together. Like, so nobody's gonna think badly about you because you're in class, because you're there to learn too. So
Yeah.
that's the cheat code for the social dance. But I think you just bypass the skill requirement of dancing altogether if you join the running group.
Yep.
Good one, Adam. Really good. I like that. Well, so you do fitness, so you do running, like tell us about your fitness. How do you, because a lot of these jobs that we're doing today, we're sitting at a desk all day,
Yeah.
and that's not going to be great for your body. So how do you do fitness? Like, what works for you?
So it's definitely varied a little bit over time. I guess my starting point is like I try to get in about an hour of cardio every day. Just kind of move my body, do something. I feel like, to your point, like we did not evolve to sit in front of a desk. We evolved to run around chasing animals until they died and then cast some food by the fire. So I think that's definitely been a good thing for me. And I really try to do that almost every day. So it's like almost not something I think about. It's just like I get up, like I got to do this today. It's like brushing my teeth. And then right now I try to do more strength training as well, just kind of diversify a little bit, try to do a yoga class once a week. But I think the other thing that's helped me at different stages of my life is just setting like goals for yourself, and hopefully kind of aggressive ones. So when I was younger, I did an Ironman, and I mean, that was like a crazy thing to do. And I mean, I built up to it over a couple of years, but like that was the kind of thing that I think really like motivates you. And it's like, okay, like if I do this, like I'm going to need to like change some things in my life to make this happen. At one point I got pretty into yoga, and I got like certified to teach yoga. And so that was another like, okay, I got to like really, get into this, so I'm going to do this thing. And there's a balance there, because I think you can only have so many audacious goals going at the same time. So, if you're in the early stages of building your business, maybe it's not the best time to say I'm also going to do an Ironman. But maybe if you feel like things are a little bit less of a point there, maybe you want to push on the fitness side. But right now, I think I'm a little bit more in the maintenance mode versus the audacious goal mode.
Okay, so maintenance mode for you, I'm hearing it's like an hour a day of getting up and you go to the gym.
So I usually just try to do like cardio. I've got a Peloton here, or I'll just like run around my neighborhood and just make it super easy. Of like, for that, I basically like I want to maximize the time I'm working out for the time that I'm like investing, and so I don't want to like drive half an hour somewhere and then run and then drive back. I want to like walk out my door. I want to run. I want to just like come back and move on with my so I do that. I do like gym weights 3 times a week, and do like yoga once a week, basically.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's great. So you're mixing it up, right? You got running at home, and then you got running outdoors. You've got the gym. Obviously, that's not all. You got to go to the gym, and then you got like yoga. I'm guessing that's a class
Yeah.
at the gym, or
I usually just do it,
yes.
yeah.
So sometimes you're getting out, and the gym is not too far. You don't have to drive some crazy distance to get to the gym, right? This is all like super important. Okay, and how do you keep yourself motivated so that you do this every day? Because as we said, we can get caught up in like fun problems that we're working on, it's something else. So what gets you at so that you can get to the gym or get out running, get out in the neighborhood, or get on the Peloton? What gets you from one mode to the other?
So I think one of the things I try to do is I generally like try to do it first thing in the morning. And so I almost like make it like not a choice, and basically like before I'm getting into work, I'm doing the run or whatever. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes you got the early morning call or whatever, and you just got to do what you need to do. But I find like that early morning time, like unless you're dealing with different time zones, like generally people are not going to schedule things with you then, and are usually like themselves either sleeping or doing something else. So I think that's like the most like safe time to plan something, because otherwise if you do it during the day, like you can get busy with work, or you can say you're going to do it after work, but then someone's going to be like, let's get drinks or let's get dinner or whatever, and maybe it doesn't happen. So first thing in the morning is, I guess, kind of my...
So first thing, and then how do you get out of bed knowing that you have to do something? What gets you from asleep and hopefully, having a nice time sleeping, feeling good, to go, okay, I have to do this big outburst of energy? What gets you from that from sleep to out of bed and exercise?
Well, first, I'm a morning person, so I think that helps me some. Of like usually when I'm like I'll naturally wake up early. I'll basically never use an alarm clock unless like it's like a 4 a.m. flight. I have to get up for it, so I'll just naturally get up. And then I think one thing I do for a lot of it is I think I just try to make it actually fun, I'll call it. So, like, especially my running, I do a lot of like lower intensity running. I use a heart rate monitor for everything I do, and I like target heart rate zones. So I have some where I'm like really trying to like hit higher intervals, but a lot of what I'm doing is, call it like sub 140 beats per minute. And that's a pretty pleasant, at least if you do it for a while and you kind of build up that baseline, that's a pretty pleasant experience. So, yeah, hopefully you kind of like what you're doing and it's not just like, oh my God, I have to do this thing.
Is there a particular device that works really well for you that you might recommend others to check out?
I use the Apple Watch right now. I used to use a Garmin when I was doing the triathlon stuff. That's definitely got more higher tech stuff, but I think unless you're like really into it, the value of just having like one device and like not having another thing you have to deal with, the Apple Watch kind of does enough for you for what you need.
Yeah, I keep seeing commercials for Ring, or oh no, sorry, Oro, or
yeah. I do actually have my sister got it for me as a gift, so I do actually have one of those.
yeah, and they say like it'll monitor your stress and it's going to help you get better sleep and know how well you slept. And I'm like, how different is that from the Apple Watch experience?
So I will say, like, I would have now having used it for a while, like I would not buy it for myself. But I think now I guess I have it, so I use it. What it does, I think the thing it does that's most valuable is actually on the sleep. And what it gets in the Apple Watch, I think doesn't, is it's basically it's more precise or more demanding, I guess you could say, of like the Apple Watch is basically going to say like, hey, you got in bed at whatever 10 o'clock, you woke up at 6 o'clock, you got 8 hours of sleep. And the Ring is going to be like, well, yeah, you got in bed at 10, but you didn't actually fall asleep till 10:20. And at 3 in the morning, you were up for 15 minutes here. So your sleep quantity was actually less than you thought it was. And so I think that is, I think, the most valuable thing that you can get out of the Ring. Like I said, I'm not pushing the Ring.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm fascinated. I do want to purchase a device, and I'm interested to figure out like what people see as the pros and cons. So I'm still in the information gathering mode. But
Yeah.
So let's talk about fun. What do you do for fun, Adam? What's the most fun for you these days? Like, how are you having fun?
So aside from like all the stuff we talked about, I guess my geeky hobby is I'm pretty into board games. So particularly these like European style like strategy games that like you probably never heard of. But I've got a couple of friends who are into them as well, and so we'll do game days together. Yeah, I think that's pretty fun for me. I get some of that like problem solving going, and it's very collaborative and interactive. Versus I think some of my work can be a little more solitary right now, if I'm just doing my own thing.
So not like Catan or something along the lines of Catan.
So I joke that Catan is like the gateway drug, right? Where like when you start doing it, you think Catan is cool, and by the time you get to like where I am, it like doesn't give you the high you need anymore. And, you need harder drugs. Yeah, so Catan is definitely like the starting point.
What's the good one that you're on now? Like, where are you at? What's the board game of choice these days?
So there's one called Frosthaven that's like I guess kind of a you each play a character, and it's like a little kind of fantasy theme, but you can fight monsters. There's one called Spirit Island that's really fun. It's actually a kind of a takeoff of Catan. So I think the guy who designed this game, his premise is basically, hey, this island Catan, like, were the people who lived there before the settlers came? Did they want cities built there? Did they want someone building the longest road? And so in this game, you each play one of the native spirits of the island, and you basically have to help the people of the island repel the settlers. So it's very like almost anti-colonialist.
You're repelling the settlers of Catan.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so cool. Okay, now I'm intrigued. I want to check this out. Okay, Spirit Island and Frosthaven. All right, those sound good. Yeah, I need to branch out because for me the level of people I play with are like very mixed level and mixed ages. So some people are just like just trying to grasp the rules of Catan because they play it so infrequently, and then some people are like, I think, ready for the next games. So yeah, I want to check those out. So okay, so when you play, like what makes it fun for you, right? You mentioned one aspect, which is like you're doing like solo work as a solopreneur with your crypto, finance work, debugging code and getting bug bounties and things and moving forward from there. But so one aspect of it is that you get to be with your friends and collaborate by playing a game. What are some of the other elements that make it fun?
So the particular genre that I would say I enjoy most is these cooperative games. So like Catan, right? You're playing against someone and like we're playing together, like either I win and you lose or you win and I lose. These cooperative ones, you're like basically playing together to beat the game. And so I really like that. And that gives you a little more of that, like it adds on to that collaborative feeling, right? Of like you and I are problem solving together about like how are we stopping the game from beating us basically. So I think that's a big part of it. And then I like to have some depth so that it itself is like a problem you're trying to solve and a question you're trying to answer of like, what's the best thing I can construct with these resources? What's the best strategy I can take here? And then, yeah, it's just an opportunity to be with your friends. We usually make a day out of it and we'll do breakfast, we'll cook dinner. And yeah, it's really good to have that. And I think have some people in your life who aren't related to the work stuff you do, and so don't really care about it and kind of keep you grounded a little bit.
Yes. Yes. So you're dealing with people who are completely outside of your financial sphere, your work sphere, right? And only in your fun sphere and maybe part of your family because they're that close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. So you're finding joy in balancing those things out. In that's part of the joy too. When you guys do breakfast or cook dinners, like, is this also a collaborative thing, or are you like going out somewhere, eating, and then coming back to play the game?
We'll usually do something at home, so it's kind of all one thing. But sometimes we'll pick something up or something. But yeah, it kind of adds to the collaborative aspect.
Yeah, it seems like keeping that same location is part of it, right? Like you can't take the game with you to the cafe.
It's got too many components, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and I think there is something very like primal about sharing that meal together
Yeah.
as well. They call it breaking bread, right? Or
Yeah.
with clinking the wine together so that the wine from one glass mixes with the wine from the other glass, so that we know that we're not poisoning each other. We're all going to die together because the poison is mixed, right? It was in one of our glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like these are very human things that we really want to do over hundreds and thousands of years. So yeah. So okay. So playing games is one of the big joys of your life right now. What else do you do for fun? Like what other things, like it could be something little or something.
Yeah.
It could be just like something that's like brought you a bunch of what's something that brought you like way more joy than you thought it would?
So I think just being out in like nature, even in like very moderate ways, is like very underrated. So I'm a member of like a bunch of botanical gardens near where I live. So I'll go there a decent amount or just like walk around my neighborhood. But I think just like getting outside and having like a little bit of just like natural light, walking around, I think that's super good.
Yeah, yeah. There's the vitamin D, right, of the sun,
Yeah.
connecting with your skin and then making that reaction, and then just all the like I'm reminded of like when I take the dog out for a walk, right? The dog is out for a smell more than anything, right? I wonder if we actually get some other things that we don't even know, like when we smell like fresh plants, like they're putting off oxygen, like after the rain, you get those
Yeah.
smells. Something about being outside, we're not going to get those smells inside, like the light, the smells, the different sensory experiences that we have is very different outside. So yeah, just getting. I had a question for you, and maybe I don't know if you'll have an answer for this. But do you remember Pokemon Go?
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that really struck me about that was people were outside, like across the country, like, and I noticed it in the area, in my neighborhood, like so many people were out and about.
Well, it was crazy to me because not only got people out, but I think it got a pretty like wide cross section of like I remember like at the time I was working on a space like Wall Street firm and like this guy was like very senior guy or managing like a lot of money. He was into Pokemon. And, he was like, well, I'm going on this like business trip to Boston so I can get some water Pokemon there. I was like, "Okay, fair enough."
Yes.
But yeah, it really got people out because I remember I was living in this kind of small town at the time, and there was like basically the town courthouse was like a few blocks away from our house. And I walked by there once, and there's like all these people in front of the courthouse, right? And I was like, "Is there a protest going on? Like, what's happening here?" Like, no, it was like a zone where like you get this like rare Pokemon, and like all these people are getting Pokemon. Uh, yeah, I think that was really also cool because it created like a real shared experience. And I think one of the like we've had more and more micro targeting society, which is like in a way really good. Of like I'm into these weird board games, and like there's content for me that's like very targeted to that. But it means that we have fewer like experiences that like we've all really had. And maybe like COVID was like the biggest one that like we really all had across whatever our interests or education levels or what have you were. And yeah, in its own small way, I think that Pokemon kind of managed to cut across.
Yeah. Yeah. And it brings up for me some of the things that you were talking about earlier, uh, like cooperative games versus like I'm trying to win and others will lose games. Because I kind of felt like it had both, right? Because yes, for your account, right, you have to collect all the Pokemon, but then people would share the locations, like you said,
Yeah.
like, hey, we're all at the courthouse. This is where you can get this rare Pokemon, right? So in some way, it was cooperative because there were like message, like groups that would share like chats, like I know, oh, come with me. In fact, I seem to remember seeing people like go, and I know I went with groups and we would go to certain areas together, like and we would go for the purpose of collecting Pokemon, but it was all of us together in a group. So in that
Yeah.
way it was cooperative. What do you think why do you think that died, and like how could we create something that would be better?
Yeah, that would be really, really interesting. I don't know. I mean, I guess it was interesting to me that it like succeeded so much just because like I feel like the Pokemon thing itself was like kind of specific, right? Like I don't know, at least for me, like I never interacted with Pokemon when I was a kid. I think in a way like that, the idea maybe of just like and that combination of the shared and the individual experiences was like compelling enough that I think a lot of people like got into it even though like they wouldn't have been kind of independently interested in uh Pokemon. But yeah, I think more like I've definitely seen even some things like in the blockchain space and people like trying to do that in different ways. But I think the other thing that was striking about it was bridging the physical and the virtual worlds, right? Because like the Pokemon was in this like specific place and like you had to go out into the world and do it. You couldn't just be sitting on your couch on your iPad and like getting all the Pokemon. I think that's something we've seen very little of because it's almost like it's one of those paradoxical things that it's like initially almost raising the barrier to entry, right? Of like, why am I going to make it hard for people to interact with my application? Like, they can't just do it at home. They have to like go to all these weird places. But then it ultimately makes it more compelling.
Yeah. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember they wanted people to exercise. They wanted people to explore.
Yeah, I think that was part of the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So like by having that be part of their, mission, and then they were successful, right? And I think they've made a few games, that company. Like they started with like a non-branded game, just like that they created themselves. I remember I tried playing it. It was
I
okay.
think something with portals or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then there was Pokemon, and then there was also like I think a Harry Potter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I remember friends at Disneyland were doing the Harry Potter. I downloaded it. I didn't stick the way Pokemon did for me, but I think for some people they were really into the Harry Potter version. Like how let's suppose you're gonna do this for crypto, right? Like how would how would you make this happen today? Like what would you use in your thinking? Like how would you approach this? Like if you want to make an app that would get people out of their houses and having fun playing a game together, like what would you think?
That's a very, very interesting one. Very open ended. Um, yeah, I really like the idea of people having to work together to do something. And maybe another like way you could take it is like not only like you have to be in a specific place, but maybe you actually need someone else to help you get this thing. I think the other thing maybe you need to figure out, and I don't know if I have the answer to this, but like how do you get these things that you're getting to like have some real value, and not this, I mean, maybe financial value, but not just financial value, but some greater value. Because I think part of the problem we run into with like Pokemon or a lot of these things is, I don't know if you ever heard that there's like this kind of this fun game called Progress Quest. And basically it's just like a dungeon explorer, but basically you're just like making your numbers bigger, right? And all you ever do is you make your numbers bigger, which when you peel it away is what a lot of these games are. And I think one of the things they run into eventually is you're kind of like, okay, like, do I care, right? Like initially it's fun. I'm like, oh, I'm collecting the water Pokemon. But at some point you step back and you're like, okay, like what do these Pokemon actually do for me? Like, why should I waste my time on this? And I think figuring out like how that really does have some longer term value is maybe what you need to answer. I mean, maybe one part of it is just financial, and crypto can definitely answer that, right? Of like you own your water Pokemon and you can sell to someone else and what have you. But I wonder how you make it even more than that. But there are probably some interesting things you do there.
I kind of thought of something like, when I was thinking of like UBI, like a universal basic income scheme, and I was like, oh, they could tie it to, fitness, a fitness app, right? When I was thinking, Pokemon was what inspired me to that idea. This is a lot ago when I was thinking about this. I don't know about it now, but we're here, so just gonna mention it. But I thought that was fun because then people could get more fit, right? They could complete quests every day, walk this far, get this much of like UBI dollars or whatever the currency is, and then go up this many stairs, walk up this mountain, like, because the phone it can track your elevation, and the phone can track how far you've walked and how much you've run and things like
totally.
that. So you could, I mean, of course, people would figure out a way to game it as they do. They would drive.
You have some trolley that just goes up and down the mountain.
People would drive around, I think, at very slow speeds, so you could collect Pokemon and it didn't think you were like in a car. But just to encourage people to get fit, maybe keep their weight in a certain. But I do actually think that other countries do this, like outside the USA. We're both in the USA, but I know that there are other countries who I've heard at least that they pay their citizens to stay within a certain weight, to have certain like health markers that they meet when they go to see the doctor. Like, I wonder if that would be like a bad thing, in terms of like government spending, right? We could maybe get some incentives for people to have better health outcomes, which would like take some of the burden off of the medical system in terms of more prescription drugs and things like that, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's Tesla or SpaceX. At least at one point, they had like a policy of basically like, we'll pay for your gym membership, but we're going to track how many times you go to the gym. And if you don't actually go to the gym more than whatever 3 times a week, then we're going to deduct it from your paycheck. But if you go, it's totally free.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I like these things, or certain companies will have the gym built into the building, or I think in Japan I heard they do this at the beginning of the day. They would have
like the calisthenics together.
Stretching. Yeah. I can only see how this would help a company. I don't see downsides. Maybe it's just me having rose-colored glasses, but it seems to think that this would be an amazing thing for companies or governments to do, yeah. But as a game, and if you could make some money making a game where people get crypto for completing challenges together, I don't know. I get fascinated by certain ideas.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, so we talked about your financial, like, moving forward. Can I ask you, how do you see the through line? You said it's varied. How do you see the through line in your life? Like when you were young, like your first time when you ever started thinking about like, what is the world of finance? What is money? Like what can I do with money? Money seems to be able to buy things. Like what was your first like understanding of relationships? Like what did you want as a kid? And then where are you now based on what you thought as a kid you wanted to achieve in terms of like finance?
I think for me it was probably always a little bit more about freedom. I think going back to that idea of like the question and kind of being motivated by the question, like I think it was more about just wanting to ask questions, and I felt like money was almost like something I want to get to a point where like I didn't have to worry about it, where just like I could ask the questions I wanted to ask and not worry about like, well, are these the questions that are rewarded or whatever. And so like even like when I was in college, like initially, like it wasn't finding something like I was originally gonna do chemistry and was like almost gonna do like a PhD in that, and then I did like philosophy and then law. So yeah, it wasn't like I was, always kind of like I was planning to, build my financial empire or whatever. But yeah, I think it was about that idea of like freedom and independence. And, I'm not on an island in the South Pacific somewhere, but I think I'm doing reasonably well on that path. But yeah, I guess I come back to that, and I think that also motivates some of my thinking about like, this idea of like the treadmill and wanting to be careful of like not just like spending money on things because other people are spending money on them and kind of raising that run rate, but like kind of actually deliberately trying to keep that run rate, a level where you're enjoying life and you're having fun, but also you're like recognizing that there's like value to that freedom. If that number is lower, then you need a lower total number overall. Just kind of say like, whatever else happening in the world, I'm good here and I can do what I want to do.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear. Money is freedom. Like, I know I thought the same way when I first kind of discovered money is the thing that's allowing us to do fun stuff. That's how we movies. That's how we can, live in the apartment or whatever, that's how we can get food. But wanting to ask questions that you wanted to ask, I think that's really, really interesting. And like, so you've had that your whole life that you wanted to be able to ask the questions you wanted to ask. And like, how did that happen that you knew that that was what you valued? Like, what's your earliest, how'd you get to that?
Um, I think at some level I also like wanted to be able to keep doing some things I was doing because I remember I was in college and I had this thought to myself that like not that I was actually gonna do it, but like I really like college and like I thought to myself like, man, wouldn't it be amazing if you could just like stay in college forever and just kind of go from one subject to another and just like do them all over like 90 or 100 years. And again, you kind of realize, okay, you can't quite do that, but like, yeah, I guess I kind of had that thought, and obviously one thing as well, like you got to make some money along the way. Uh, and so yeah, I guess I think I was fortunate that most of the things that I've been excited about, I've found some way to like be compensated for relatively well. But I think, yeah, I guess I always thought it would be nice to just not even have that be a consideration. Just be like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, take money out and I can still pursue what gives you energy,
Yeah,
right? Which
yeah,
is the questions, right? Those things
yeah,
are is what we discovered, right?
yeah,
Here. And
yeah,
that's fascinating. So so the money isn't about money. It's about a means to be able to still have energy, asking the questions you want to have, which gives you more energy.
yeah. You want to put it?
That's interesting. That's really neat. And 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 so I asked you before, but I just want to hear it kind of again. Like, how do you
Yeah.
measure energy in yourself? How do you know you're energized about a thing?
What you naturally do versus what you have to push yourself to do.
So it just comes naturally to you that you want to do this thing. And do you wake up wanting to do the thing, or how do you know naturally you want to do it? Like, how does it come to you?
I mean, sometimes it's the opposite. It's like you can't sleep until you've like figured out the things. But I mean, maybe another way to think about it is like how you feel when you're like comparing it to something else, right? Of like we talked before about like with the significant other and like if you've got some of this work to do and whenever the significant other wants to do the thing, are you like, hey, like leave me alone, let me do my thing on the margin, right? And maybe you pull yourself back because you're like, okay, I can't be a total social misanthrope. Or are you like, to God, like even if you want to go to the grocery store, great, I'll go to the grocery store with you just because like subconsciously this is giving me an excuse not to like do this other thing that I don't really want to
Oh,
do.
yeah. You know what I found that I do in those situations? I will this has been a struggle for me my whole life. This exact thing that you talked about. But I've learned that, there's no deep work without interruption. It just happens. And so I've learned that and then I had to do it with my son too, because I see him doing deep work. And the way that I found it worked with him was to be like, how much time do you need? You need, do you need 5 minutes? Do you need half an hour? How about an hour? like how much time? And then having that timer would help to make the transition, you know, like
Yeah.
for my son, to be like, okay, it's going to be an hour and I'm going to come back in an hour and then we'll see, maybe you'll still need 2 minutes and that would be okay, but I'll leave you alone for this time, you know, and then that really helped the relationship with him because he knew he could have some space to continue doing his deep work, but he also knew there was going to be a thing at a certain time and that the reminder was going to be gentle, like that seemed to be one of the best ways I could work it out with him, you
Nice.
know, uh, with a significant other, it's a little different. I don't know how. I still don't really always know how, except I don't really know always how to see because they're not your kid, right?
Yeah.
So they're on the same level as you. So you have to negotiate it somehow. What's so? What do you do? What do you do to negotiate that conversation? How do you negotiate with them? That's I know you're not just saying get away from me, I'm not doing my thing, right? What do you say? What's your script?
Well, I think there's something from your conversation with your kid about just like setting expectations. Because I think probably the worst thing is like when you violating expectations where you're continually violating expectations. So, if it's like you're having a conversation on Saturday morning and they're like, hey, let's like whatever go to the park, and you're like, well, I'm like doing my work stuff. I think like maybe you got to think a little bit of like to your point, maybe you got to be like the more adult version of your son of like, is this I need 15 minutes? Is this I need an hour? Or is this I need 8 hours? And all of those are maybe okay, but they're just like different conversations, right? Of like, hey, you want to give me 15 minutes, right? Probably fine. If it's an hour, it's like, well, do you want to go to the park and then we can do something in the afternoon, or do you want to go to the park in the afternoon, right? If it's like 8 hours, then it's like, I'm sorry, I think I'm swamped. Like, I feel like I need a day for this. And maybe then you need another conversation about like, is that okay in the broader scheme of things? But I think that's way better than being like, I need a little time. And then you comes back an hour later and you're like, I need more time. And like, she's kind of like hovering over you the whole day. And she feels like she hasn't gotten to do anything fun for the day. And you feel like you've been like bothered the whole day.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. At that point, I think you got to take that step back. Really, from what I'm hearing, you say sounds like a smart way to handle it is to like take that step back and then have the discussion of what should we do when these times arise, right? Let's plan this together. Like, there's gonna be times when I'm gonna like, I know me, I know myself. Sometimes I need a bunch of time. I need a block of time, and that might not be something you're used to. But let's figure it out together because it's who I am to the best of my ability right now. I don't know how to not be that. So let's figure this thing out together. Sometimes I'm going to need 8 hours, I'm going to need an hour, whatever. Because it's disappointing on both sides. Like you said, it's disappointing for the person trying to do deep work because you're feeling interrupted. And it's disappointing on the other side because they're like, I want to go have some fun. So then, like, maybe helping her, like, to plan, over plan so that she can have other stuff to do, right? Your significant other, like, they can have multiple things that are options already in mind. Okay, well, if you don't want to go to the park, I'm going to go to the cafe and I'm going to read my book. Do you want to go to the park? No, I can't right now. Why don't you go to the cafe and read your book? And then let's check in 2 hours, right? Yeah, I'm just looking for different ideas there because
Yeah. Well,
I don't think you and I are the only people to experience this issue of,
yeah.
yeah,
I think the other thing would be having maybe even more macro expectations. Like think about like to your point about thinking about like the next year. We're just defining also what kind of a couple you are. Like, are we the kind of couple who we work during the week, but like the weekend, like we don't work and we just spend time together. And like if we do have to do something that's kind of a like I don't know, call it not crisis, but that's an unusual situation that we need to work through. Or are we the kind of couple who we're a power couple and on average, maybe one day a weekend is we're both doing our work and exactly how that gets scheduled in varies from week to week, but that's kind of our baseline. And I think depending on, I'm sure there's some continuum between there, but I think just probably agreeing on that continuum initially, like helps kind of diffuse a lot, right? Because if you say like, hey, we're just like every weekend, this is one day a weekend is going to be a working day, then okay, it's either Saturday or Sunday, or it's like half one, half dozen the other. We can schedule around, but that's kind of what we talked about. Or if you say that's not, then okay, that's a more unusual thing. And you can kind of talk about like, are you living up to your expectation there? And were your expectations realistic and stuff like that?
and these are moving targets because people
Sure.
change,
100%.
and couples change. Like maybe in the beginning, like you're gonna have certain expectations, and then later in the relationship, the expectations might change. I want now for us to spend a little more time. Like one of you might start having different expectations. Now I want to spend more time doing more of this type of thing. You know, and then having those conversations at the macro level, I think might change you guys as a couple.
Yeah. And I think
Because
also as you kind of, no, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because it go from dating to engaged to marriage to kids, right? Because you mentioned that was the trajectory that we're looking at.
Yeah.
So you changing as a couple, and those words are how we categorize that change. But it's real changes when real things are shifting that let you get to the next one every time.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. Because I even think about like, there's that initial like courtship phase where I think sometimes, at least for me, you're like, okay, I'm really trying to make this work. I'm putting aside my other things, and you're really investing a lot of time. And then it gets to some point where it's a little bit more, call it steady state, and you're like, okay, now that we're like together all the time, I can't just always put off some other things. And it's like, okay, I do have to do some of the other things. And you're right, as you get into like having kids or stuff like that, that completely changes in a different way. So yeah, I think continue to like have those conversations about it is really important.
Yeah, yeah, it's huge. The communication part is like the biggest one, as you brought up in the beginning. It's just one of the biggest parts of the whole relationship. So do you have like advice for other people who are, like if you were talking to, somebody who, like your younger self, right? Like how would you, and they want to do some of the things that they're seeing you do today, right? So they want to like have a career in finance tech. They want to, like pursue like having a balance in their life of fitness, family, fun. Like what would be the best thing you could tell your younger you to like help you navigate to get to, like, it seems like you feel like, you're kind of happy in your life. Like that's what I'm getting. It feels, I
Yeah.
don't feel like you're like a miserable person. I feel like you seem like you're pretty happy. And this whole conversation is not about like, like, hey, you have to be perfect in all these areas. This is about like, this is a work in progress. We're all working on different parts of our lives. So how could you talk to your younger self or somebody like in their like early starting out phase?
I think I would be more focused on doing things that like at the time I was excited about and enjoying versus I think sometimes I did something because kind of I thought it was going to get me somewhere I wanted to be. Or like I stuck with something of like, I'm not really enjoying this job, but I think if I put a few more years in here, it'll like help me get whatever. And I think my experience has been that like sometimes those things you were trying to get are either turn out to be not things you want or they just don't happen for whatever reason. And I think also like when you're kind of in one of those stages, you're not doing your best work, right? You're not actually like loving and inspired by this thing. You're putting your time in. That's right. That's kind of that situation. And yeah, I guess I just like you feel like you're making a quote unquote investment for the future, right? Of like, I'm doing this thing I don't like to get to a better place. And I think that's actually like not paying off as much as if you like said like, hey, it seems like I'm not actually that excited about what I'm doing right now. What would I be excited about? And just doing that thing.
Nice. So following where you feel the energy and not
Yeah.
like drudgery through, something that's not giving you the new questions that you want to answer
Yeah.
and helping
Yeah.
you learn the things you want to learn. What do you think was like the very best investment you ever made for like your overall like financial health? Like what if you took this one thing away, you would not things wouldn't be as good. But this one thing like helps.
Like a asset or like an idea or just like I think definitely like that idea of the treadmill and kind of not letting the treadmill just keep going faster. I think that was definitely a big one.
How did it help you?
Well, I think just not not spending money on like stupid stuff, and I think being at a point now where like I feel very happy and fulfilled, I would say, but like I don't know if I'm actually like spending that much more per month than I did when I was like much younger. Yeah, that definitely like gives me more freedom.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then in terms of fitness, like what's been the the number one thing that like moved the needle for you that you could give to others, like that's moved the needle for you in terms of fitness?
So I read this book, Born to Run, and it really had a big impact on me because growing up, I was not an active kid. I think I got this idea from my parents that like you were either smart or you were athletic, and it was kind of mutually exclusive. And so I hadn't really done like sports or anything growing up. And I read this book that was basically kind of, I guess, two stories. One is it's about this tribe of native people in Mexico who like they just run all their lives. Like old people run, young people run, everyone runs. And they run these incredible distances and they run way older than like most people in like developed countries would be when they run. And so part of it was that, and then part of it was about this like barefoot running movement and kind of how that evolved along with this movement for doing ultra marathons in like the United States. And it kind of inspired me to just be like, you know what, you should be able to run a mile every day. Like, okay, you're busy with all this stuff, but you run a 10-minute mile. Like it's 10 minutes. You don't have 10 minutes to do something. And so I started just doing that. I just ran like a mile every day. And if you do it for a while, like a mile's not actually that long. So I started like doing longer distances and built up into the LA Marathon and I did the triathlons and stuff. But I think that was really like the start of my journey there.
Oh, I gotta check out that book.
Yeah, it's really good.
Oh, nice. Okay. And what about family? Like what has been the best investment you've given yourself that has informed you towards like where you know what you want? Because I think where you're at from what I'm hearing right now is like you don't have what you want in terms of family, right? Like well, wife and kids, right? But you do know what you want, which a lot of people don't. And I think that's crucial to getting what you want is to first know what you want. And you're very clear on that. So I think you're actually, even though you might not think yourself that you're like far ahead, I do think that you're really far ahead in this area because you have that knowledge about yourself. So what's been the best investment to get you to this place?
I think some of the relationships I've had in the past, I mean, they all didn't work out for whatever reason, but I think you learn a lot from those. And I think sometimes maybe looking back, you kind of learn more than you did at the time. And I think sometimes maybe it's not even like this was the wrong person for you, but maybe it was the wrong person for you at that stage of your life, or you were the wrong stage of life for that person. But I think you can learn a lot from those prior relationships.
So you re-examine, you do a postmortem, and you think about it after it's over, and you still keep learning those lessons.
Yeah, or you just, I think sometimes even like I have something of like, I think like, man, this thing that person did, like, drove me crazy at the time, but like, I actually think it's pretty good now.
So, like what? Like what?
No, I mean, like, well, even just like the thing about like having kids. And like, I was with someone, I think in the earlier stage of my life, like that was really important for them. And I think at the time I was more focused on kind of career stuff, and I didn't feel like I was ready for that. And that was kind of a big point of tension for us at the time. And not that they were the right person, but I was like, they were right about that.
It does sometimes take a minute for that to sink in. Like if you haven't had that thought before, or if you haven't had that perspective before, it can take a minute to let that thought in and find out for yourself like where you could support that in your life. So I understand that. I think that's very understandable. And people aren't at the same place at the same time, on every subject. And also, sometimes some relationships are right for one thing and then some are right for another thing. So I think all of that's completely understandable. It makes a lot of sense. All right. What about your best investment for fun?
Well, I mean, definitely, like, I really enjoy these board games, and some of these, like, it is amazing how many hours you can spend on them. I mean, so I remember when I was doing consulting, I was in, like, the entertainment practice at this big consulting firm, and they did this, like, one analysis on basically, like, how much, like, dollars you spent basically per hour of entertainment. Because there was this, like, theory that, like, everything is like ultimately the same like dollars per hour, right? Of like take the movie ticket price, divide by like not link the movie, it's like the same number as all these other things. And I think that like it sounds like a smart theory. I think it's actually not true at all. But like if you look at these like board games, even these like fancy board games that like you might spend like a few $100s on, like it is amazing how many hours like you can spend on them with your friends. And like if you take on like any kind of per hour basis, like you're getting a great deal there. But I think actually more than I would say the getting outside thing, because like that's literally free. And I think it has all these other benefits.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, those are really great. Those are all. Well, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you, Adam. I really,
Yeah, it's been super fun.
wow, this is awesome. Yeah, thank you. I really felt like we touched on a lot of stuff that
Yeah, we
uh,
did.
not only you and I think is interesting, but I think other people are going to think is pretty useful and interesting as well. And hopefully help some people, turn some people onto some good ideas and some good practices and some cool games as well.
Yeah.
And then, what do you think? At the end of every podcast, the traditional question is like, who else should I interview? Like, who do you think I should try to interview?
Oh, I'm not sure. I don't know if I have like a great like next person for you. I'm gonna have to think about that
That's cool.
one.
Um, Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks again, Adam. I really appreciate you taking the time
Yeah,
today, and I think that people are really going to be interested to hear the things you have to say here and the things we discovered together in the call.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were a great conversation partner here. Yeah, I thought you had a lot of really good thoughts. So thank you so much.
Thanks. All right. Well, I'll see you again.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.